about race, diversity, human connection. It's complicated, but it is 100% worth the effort.
And that is what we're all about. Welcome to the Let's Talk Sis podcast.
Someday we'll make it on
Conversations are hard.
Days we only can try.
Lean into new perspectives, new experiences, new stories.
Either way, we're gonna get better.
It's the week of February 10th, 2025, and last Sunday, Beyonce won some pretty exciting and controversial Grammy Awards, and we want to talk about it. We want to talk about Beyonce's album, Cowboy, the historical context, why there's so many thoughts and feelings and opinions and emotions surrounding this.
There have been so many opinions and emotions surrounding this. So first of all, Beyonce won Album of the Year and also Country Album of the Year for her album, Cowboy Carter. And I have never seen so many feelings play out so quickly. Some really positive, but others very, very upset. How dare you give Beyonce, when her country album doesn't even sound that country, how dare you give her these awards?
It's interesting. I've had to dig deeper and get a little curious and think, okay, what is the criteria? How are they judging these? What really is like the credentials, or what is the backbone of country music? And it's storytelling. And it's interesting because we both grew up in the Destiny Child era.
Oh, yeah.
And Beyonce era. So that is a lot of the music that we connected to, we have memories around. But it is also interesting because I feel like we had a little bit of a connection to country life, country music. Our grandma loved country music. She would listen to it all the time. I grew up thinking I literally wanted to be Dolly Parton.
I did. I remember.
I thought she was the most beautiful woman on earth. I loved her music. We grew up as cloggers.
We sure did.
So we were kind of in that world where we had an appreciation for that lifestyle, the stories, the music. It's a big part of our family history on our mom's side. So I could see if you were to just listen to the album and be like, that doesn't all sound like country, and the country that I know and love, because it's a representation of a life, of values, and a group of people.
I mean, that is all true. And I think what I would like to acknowledge here is that this is so much more than an album. And if you're looking at it as, oh, this is just another country album and I don't feel like it checked all the boxes of what we think of country music as, then you're probably upset about it. But I feel like this is so much more than an album. It's a cultural statement. She's paying homage to those who went before her in this industry. And the fact that we don't know those people until this album comes out says something, says there are deep roots in this album. And I want to kind of take that apart because I'm finding there are so many layers.
And I want to take that apart with you because I have been fascinated from the second this album came out. I can't even tell you how many times I Googled Black cowboys, Black country music, Black Westerners, people in history, everything that I never grew up knowing or hearing. And I've even questioned my whole childhood of watching John Wayne movies and being like, wait, were there Black cowboys back then? And how would I think that maybe there weren't? Like, it's honestly been mind-blowing because, of course, if you look at American history, of course they were there.
Yeah.
But we don't know those stories, and they haven't been represented in mainstream media at all. And this is an opportunity to go learn about those. And every time I listen to one of the songs, I find a new historical connection with new meaning. And I can't decide. There's moments where I'm like, am I connecting this? Is this not?
I felt
Did
the
Beyonce
same
mean
way.
this? Like, I honestly am like, did you talk to historians? And like, how much research did you do before you made this album? It's layered. It is so layered.
It is layered. Okay, so where do we want to start?
I think we need to start with the easiest entry point of Blackbird.
Oh, I love that
so
song.
as a 12-year-old girl, I was obsessed with the Beatles.
We were just talking about
them.
this. Alexis saw one of those commercials on 90s TV where if you buy like a certain amount of CDs, you get a couple for free. And so she was getting CDs in the mail all the time. And she was all about the Beatles. She had like their white album, their black album.
It was wild how obsessed, because no one around me listened to the Beatles. I was just like, I love this. I love this so much. But it's interesting to understand and to see kind of this historical connection. Paul McCartney over in London, England, seeing the civil rights movement play out here in the United States. And there were lots of parts and pieces. And if you have to understand that part of the strategy with the civil rights movement was to show a lot of this on TV.
It absolutely was. And I think there was the hope that people looking from the outside would get a glimpse of the harsh reality, because when you're living in it, there's a lot of chaos and confusion and a lot of feelings of, I don't know what to do. So there was a hope. And I think there were a lot of distinct moments in history, even with Mamie Till, for an example, of her choosing what she chose with her son's funeral, is she needed the world to see what was happening. So that was a conscious choice for a lot of moments in the civil rights era.
Well, and to think of people maybe not here close to it, watching it play out and their view of it, that specifically Paul McCartney was inspired by Little Rock Nine, which that was, we've heard the Ruby Bridges story about when Brown versus Board pretty much desegregated schools, and those kids that had to go and be the first Black students to enter white schools and the experience that they had.
Yeah, Little Rock Nine, this was before Ruby Bridges.
It was.
And it was 9 high school students in Little Rock, Arkansas. And it was so traumatic what they experienced. Like the first day, they couldn't even get in the schools.
So there was a first attempt, and the governor in the area at that time sent in like armed guards, and there were protesters and there were people, and it was not safe. The kids actually couldn't enter the school.
Right.
So then you have President Eisenhower at the time that is like, no, we've decided this. This needs to happen.
So he sent in enforcement.
The National Guard. To help these children get into school safely.
But it wasn't safe.
It wasn't.
It was really hard. They ended up going into the school, but there was threats, violence, harassment, hostility. It was a very, very difficult situation.
And I see the images. When I go and I look at some of these images, I am horrified. I think, look at these children wanting an education, and look at all the hate around them. And not saying everybody felt that way, but you can see the people that were that adamant that we couldn't even go to school together.
The people who felt that way were the loudest, and that's what these kids heard.
And that's what they saw.
Yeah, that was their experience. So this whole story transitions over to Paul McCartney being really inspired to write a song that touches upon the difficulties of oppression. And I think this song is so broad in how you can interpret the meaning of it, because, you know, I think it's one of those songs that maybe he wrote it about something in specific, but as you listen to it, I'm certain everyone can connect to it in their own way.
Well, and I have listened to it several times, and at first I thought, I would take it this way. And then the more Shantae and I started talking about it, we had so many more meanings. And we were even reading, there's a woman who is a part of the Little Rock Nine who was really...
Melba. It was Melba Beals, I think.
Yes.
And she's still alive.
And she was so inspired by Beyonce's version. And we listened on our way over here to Paul McCartney's version, which I always love, and I love the Beatles. But Beyonce's version, there is a different sound. It sounds a little more like a spiritual to me.
It does, which, you know, if we're really going to dive into the history, all of that connects to country music.
It does.
You know, we have those blues chords and the spirituals that connected to gospel, and the call and response and storytelling is really all embedded in country.
And that is absolutely how so much music was influenced by Black people that are singing the songs of pain, singing songs of hope, singing songs of faith to get them through some of these difficult times. And I think that's what always I loved about country music, is the storytelling portion of it. Growing up, I like country music a lot more than Shantae did.
Right.
But I like the storytelling, how you could talk about some of the craziest things and make it fit in there.
It's all a story.
And it was relatable. So going back to Blackbird.
Yes.
Yes. the Little Rock Nine, I think that it's so fascinating because having this song, and then not only did she take a group of Black women who are country singers trying to make it in Nashville and give them an opportunity to be in this song. So that also, as she is telling this story, she's also creating opportunity. And I remember we found all these artists that we liked during this time because they were trending everywhere. And there was just a different sound, style. It just added, I think, an extra storytelling layer to country music, just from a little bit of a different perspective.
And I was reading something of someone saying that, even though it's really rooted in oppression during the civil rights movement, but it made them think of this blackbird calling out in the dead of night of enslavement and how the songs were calls to help people to freedom. And it was always in the night, in the middle of the night, that they would find that path to freedom. And so I think there are so many deep connections here. But again, it goes back to this was all purposeful. This was all intentional. Beyonce thought through every single song, but then it was, at least from my perspective, it was, okay, this song exists with power and intention, the ones that she, redid. And how can I take that a step further? And even Melba, who was part of the Little Rock Nine, she just talks a lot about how she feels like it really connected her to that time and how she was so moved by this specific piece.
Well, and when I hear the song Blackbird, I think of these broken wings, but also the bird is so prepared for the moment. And I think of those children that I'm sure it was hard and difficult. I can't even imagine, but knowing that they continued and it was showing up to school in that type of a situation, but the strength and how it helped the whole country honestly shift at that time was a lot of these visual images and watching the strength of those children continue to show up. To really sit with why people are so upset, I think that we need to talk about that a little bit more.
Yes. Okay, let me say this. I actually saw a video on TikTok saying they were so angry that she won and saying, those judges for the Grammys, it's just anyone. They're just like anyone out there. They don't even have to have a music background. And so they're just picking her because she's popular. And so I was really curious about that. I didn't know a lot.
Yeah, I don't either. To understand how do the Grammys even work, who's voting, who's behind it. One of the other things that I heard was because Jay-Z made a comment last year about his wife not winning and having the most Grammy nominations of any woman and how she's never won Album of the Year.
Right.
Some people think, those Grammy people.
He threw a little fit, so now they're just catering to this powerful man.
And I've honestly been curious about that because I think it's valid questions and points, and we don't hear about the process of all of this. And this is what is just pretty wild. We happen to have...
our producer is a member of the Academy. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to ask some questions and get a little more insight on how this actually works. Okay, we have Ross Booth here, and we want to just do a mini deep dive into how this all works, so that we can all put to rest that this was just a popularity contest.
Yeah. So first, I should say thanks for having me. I usually sit over there, but I don't mind sitting here.
I mean,
this. I might be the third sister or something.
I love it.
Okay, so I'm a member of the Recording Academy, which is basically a group of women and men who are actively working in the music industry. You can't just get in just because you want to get in. It's not like go to the website and sign up. There's a process required. It includes peer review.
Okay.
You've got to have 2 letters from people who are actively working in the music industry to be able to get in, and most of those letters come from members of the Academy itself. Additionally, you've got to have a certain number of credits over the past several years that are professional releases, and then if you can hit those 2 marks, I've got this many credits, and I've got a couple of peer reviews who are willing to vouch for me. Then you can go into the process of being reviewed for membership. But not everyone is accepted. I don't know what the numbers are exactly, but there are many applications that come in and relatively few that are accepted year to year. So it's a close, tight community. I think when we think about the Academy, whether that's the Recording Academy or the Academy of Motion Picture Sciences, I think we kind of think about this nebulous ball of whatever out there. There are not, compared to the population, certainly to the population of people working in music, this is a relatively small group of people.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell you it's small, but we're not talking about 1 million people.
Right.
We're not even talking about 100,000 people. It's a relatively small group of people who are actively working in music. And under the leadership of Harvey Mason Jr., who is the current CEO of the Recording Academy, there's an ongoing effort to make sure that the current membership is current and actively working in music. And there are a number of people who were released from membership in recent years because they were no longer actively working in music. They no longer could meet the criteria.
Interesting.
So those who are voting for the Grammys any given year are people who are actively working in music, have been peer-reviewed and accepted by the admittance body of the Academy for membership. And just as a little, interesting tidbit, those acceptances happen about June each year.
Okay.
So the application deadline is usually around beginning of March, something like that.
Yeah.
And then in the early summer, the new class is welcomed into the Academy. So that gives you a flavor for who this actually is. It's not just anybody.
It's not just, these are experts in the field who are actively working in this field.
Correct.
That makes all the difference.
That does. And can you help us understand, like, based on genres and styles, like, how are they voting?
Yes. So Grammy voting, and again, the current CEO of the Academy has done a really good job of trying to constantly remind the membership, Grammy voting is about voting for the best artistic product. It's not a popularity contest. In fact, it would be interesting. Maybe we can put one of these in the notes or something. It would be interesting for people to have a sense of what that verbiage is like.
Yeah.
It's been quite strong. Do not vote according to your popularity views. Do not vote according to, in fact, there are rules against getting together like a block of people to vote together across categories. Like that can get you thrown out of the Academy. Like this is
very
really
individual.
meant to be your individual views on what the best artistic outcome is in this particular genre. Additionally, when it comes to voting, not everybody votes in every category. You have a certain limited number of votes that you can cast in a year. Everyone votes in the major categories. So we're talking about Album of the Year. The entire Academy membership is able to vote for Album of the Year and Record of the Year and Best New Artist and a handful of others. And then beyond that, you have a limited number of categories that you can vote in. And the encouragement and directive is you vote in the categories in which you are working actively. So for me, what that means is I did not vote this year, for example, in R&B. I also, maybe particularly relevant to this conversation, I didn't vote in country because I don't work in country music. And so I don't have the right perspective to be able to vote with that corner of the industry in mind. So what I did vote in is pop music, where I work actively. I also voted in children's music, where I work actively with the One Voice Children's Choir and others. So, and a handful of other places like that are particularly relevant to what I do day to day. But again, this is not, in fact, I said to you guys a few minutes ago, the more interesting win to me at the Grammys. And actually, Beyonce was just as surprised, or maybe more shocked than any of us.
Than anyone.
Was Country Album of the Year.
Yeah.
That was a huge win, and I don't think anyone expected her to win it. And per what you've been talking about, there are people out there who feel like, well, this isn't a country album.
Yeah.
And to me, when I saw that happen, and I love her face, we've all seen the meme of her face when Taylor introduces her as the winner of that category. She is shocked and makes the most un-Beyonce face I've ever seen.
I agree.
Okay? But that was a huge aha, because who voted on that category?
People in the country industry.
People who are making country music every day. That's who decided. I didn't decide who won
So
that
here's
album.
my question with that. Because like you mentioned with Album of the Year, it's really looking at that artistic element, which I believe that Beyonce's album is so heavily artistic, it's social, it's cultural, it's nuanced. Okay, but when we're looking at a country album, are there like specific check marks? Is there a rubric of it needs to fit this genre in a certain way, or is it just open to interpretation?
I think it's got to be open to interpretation. We're talking about art.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking about art. And again, what we see with the win for Best Country Music Album is that the country industry said, we like this. We like this interpretation. We accept this interpretation as part of us. That's big. It's a huge deal.
Ooh, that just gave me chills. I loved that.
And then add to it. Now, look, again, I've said it already. I didn't vote for Best Country Album. I don't work in country, so that's not my world.
Yeah.
I did vote for Album of the Year. And Beyonce's album was one of my nominees for Album of the Year. Why? I don't listen to a lot of country. I don't even listen to a lot of R&B and the kind of hip hop that Beyonce plays in, day to day, year to year. But when the album came out last February, is it a year ago, I think?
It's been a
when
year.
the album came out and the buzz was happening, I thought I just got to be familiar with what this is. And I try to stay informed on what's happening in the industry. And I was actually on a long road trip down to whatever that is down there in the corner of Utah. Monticello?
Oh, yeah.
Blanding?
Yes.
Is Blanding down there? Long drive through the canyons, right? And actually, I had about a 2-hour call with you guys.
I remember.
And then I said, I'm going to turn on this album and see what it's about. And again, stylistically, it's not what I
your
love.
thing.
It's
Yeah.
not what I do. Totally respect Beyonce, her track record, her discography. It's totally epic. It's not what I listen to on a regular basis. However, I was really impressed with this album because of the reasons you said. It was clearly, from note one, thoughtful, artful, gathering up a lot of history, thinking about how to express not just the next musical idea, which is so common in what we get generally, but trying to express some deep ideas, deep feelings. And I respected it immediately. I'll tell you the moment that really caught my attention, and there are a number of beautiful moments. I love Blackbird, but I think it's track 3 or 4, called 16 Carriages.
Yes.
That is actually, I pulled over in Blanding after listening to that track and had to do some reading on what this meant. What does it mean? Because clearly there was a lot happening here and a lot being said, and I wanted to know what was being said.
Yeah.
And it's powerful and it's rich and it's deep. And as a member of the Academy, that is the kind of material that I want to vote for. It's the kind of material I want to make.
Yes.
It's the kind of
makes you
material.
think.
It makes us
Thought-provoking.
think. It nourishes the world. It nourishes our collective consciousness as people. That's what art was intended to do.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was thrilled to see Beyonce win. I will add as well, I was also happy to see her win this category because after so many nominations over so many years, I do think it was time. Do I think that a lesser project would have won just because it was time? No, I don't. I think people are voting for what they felt was the strongest artistic product this year in this voting year. And I believe that was the one.
Well, and Ross, I want to make a connection too, just about her thoughtfulness in all of it. When she accepted that award, what did she say?
She said, I want to dedicate this to Miss Martell. And then she made a comment as we will keep moving forward. And that gave me chills because I guarantee there were hundreds of thousands of people Googling Miss Martell in that moment, who she was referring to, Linda Martell, who was the first Black country singer who literally, her career was destroyed by racism. And she is still alive.
Well, and Shantae and I were Googling it today. We're like, where is she? What happened to her?
Beyonce had that moment to stand up and to look out to millions of us and say, I'm going to keep your story going.
Yes.
This isn't the end. We're moving forward together. This ended for you, unfortunately, but I'm stepping in. And that's the thing with this album is it's powerful in its history, and she is able to pay the honor and respect to these people who didn't get it in their time.
And that's beautiful. Again, if we're going to make art, let's make cultural statements that matter.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, and let's just be clear. This is going to be, and this is the norm for everything. Do I love everything about the project? No, I don't.
No,
Of course
and
not.
I don't either. There were a lot of songs that I was like, this is interesting.
It's
I
like
don't know
you'll
if I
listen
like
to
it.
it to listen to the art, and then you probably won't play it again.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's totally normal. But the point is, we're stepping back from this and saying, as a body of work,
Right.
there's something rich here. There's something inspiring. There's something thoughtful, and we need more of that.
I agree.
From our creators, and we should demand more of that from our creators generally in our society. We should say, if we're going to support this work, now there are times to just have good old fun, for sure. There are times for that. But in many cases, we should be saying, what can be done more to say what needs to be said, to highlight important people, to highlight important experiences, to shed light on others and the worlds that they have lived and existed in, the joys they've experienced, the struggles they've experienced. That's really what's most powerful about this particular project. And you don't have to love all of it.
Right.
But I do think we have to look at it and respect the effort and the overall outcome of something that has hit a nerve, that has helped to capture minds and hearts of people all over the world.
Well, and I really appreciate, I think, growing up biracial, seeing two worlds and the shared history.
Yes.
And just the people that I've learned about and the stories that I've learned from my curiosity from listening to this album have truly impacted me. And I feel like even how I share things with my children and the people that I'm talking about, I really see the value in that. And I don't know if music has ever taken me down that path to read, to learn, to listen, to research, and then to feel that impact of so many people's lived experiences and their contributions in a genre that I never knew about.
Okay, so that right there, I think you've made the best case that I've heard for why this is an album of the year. Did we hear that? Never before, she says, never before has music taken me down the road of study and learning and seeking and trying to understand and finding new things and generating conversations. Whoa, that's a huge aha. That sounds like an album of the year as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Yeah. Well, even the Spanish influence. Then it just took me down so many pathways that I couldn't even believe. I literally couldn't believe.
For me, it was a really full circle moment because, I started researching the roots of like the banjo and that being an instrument that enslaved Africans brought over here. And she just has all these touch points. And it really started, I started thinking, okay, music was used in the early days of this country. It was, like we talked about, it was a call for freedom. It was teaching people the path of freedom. It was getting through the difficult times through oppression. And there was a communication and also a sense of, this is my way to let you know something without having to say it out loud, right? And then we go to the civil rights movement, and like what kept them going was that music. And we think of the songs of We Shall Overcome and the songs that were passed down to the children of you can do this, even lift every voice and sing. And so it's this full circle moment of she is using music to honor some of these stories of the past that have been untold for so long.
I can't even say enough of if any of this has interested you, even the slightest bit, to go and listen and try to understand.
Pick one song.
Just
They're
even
all
one
deep.
song.
They're all great.
Well, even last night, I was trying to let my husband hear some of it, and we were talking through it, and it was funny because I was like, is that a song from the Beach Boys? Like,
Yes.
Wait, is she trying to sound like Elvis? Like, there's all these different things where I'm like, but if you really understand like history and music, you can see that back in a certain time period, Black people couldn't play in the public places.
There was a lot of
sell some of the
segregation in music. They were like considered race records, and a lot of times they would get cut their opportunities, and then other people who were allowed on stages would take those thoughts and ideas and
those
art.
sounds, and become famous and make money. And there was so much influence there that then I just was like, oh my goodness, now I need to listen to this again. And there's just these little lines and these little thoughts, and it's so fascinating. Well, and I would like to recommend an entry point. I don't think this one has a lot of history to it, but if you put headphones on that are high quality and you listen to the Protector song where you hear a little girl's voice in the beginning, and she starts saying, like she's talking about her daughter, that she'll protect her, and then she's going to shine all that light and project it, and project everything that she has out. And if you just have your headphones on and listen, you literally feel like you are on the banks of this little grassy area in the South with fireflies, and it's like you see little girls and little voices, and just this scene that feels so American, no matter your background, your race, and that you're just there like sipping lemonade, watching these little children play, and this just thought of protecting, but then when do you shine that light and project and let them go out into the world? And of course, this is my interpretation, and I am a mom, but I just felt like it's so American too. And that part right now in the current state,
That is needed.
it's wild.
Yeah.
It felt so interesting. And not everyone's going to take it this way, because there are some statements that she makes that I'm sure would make people feel very uncomfortable.
Sure.
But there are moments where I felt like I saw different perspectives and history emerge into one. And I think that growing up, having those different perspectives, even in our DNA, different lived experiences, it felt just like a moment that was so American.
Yeah. Well, and again, you've just made a very good case. Point two for an album of the year. And credit to everybody who worked on this, because somebody was responsible for crafting those environments. And again, that's an atypical approach for popular music, right? We don't get environments very often, but somebody was responsible for crafting those environments and for creating a scene that took you somewhere. And again, that sounds like an album of the year, as far as I'm concerned. We're talking about music that does more than have beats and melodies and something memorable, but it's taking people places. It's whisking people away in an aural environment, not in a video. We think right now that if it's not video, it has no transportive power, right? But we're talking about an aural environment that took you somewhere.
Well,
That's
and
impressive.
I actually like that she really hasn't had a lot of videos with this album, because it would have forced us to think it was a certain interpretation or certain way.
And it allows this open-ended, you can take in what you're needing at that moment, which I love.
Well, I can't believe that we just happen to have someone in the Academy.
I know, this was perfect.
That we know and that we work with that can give us this perspective, because it's so helpful. I honestly, the Academy is just like this invisible body of people that I've never thought about. I've never thought about accomplishments professionally, the industry that they work in, and how it's people in that industry that are judging these certain areas. And that changes things dramatically for me.
100%. And it's good to clarify that, because there is a lot of misinformation, like there is about just about everything right now. And it's good to get some clarity to that.
Well, thank you so much, Russ.
Of course.
So as we wrap up this conversation, we realize there are so many other places we could deep dive with this album, not even just with this album, but the album, I think, leads to so many other historical conversations. And we realize we don't have all day to do that, but we do want to make sure that this conversation can continue for people who are interested and want to keep talking about it.
And I would definitely recommend that people just do like a little bit of a deep dive into American history around country music, Black history, timelines of all of these things, the influences, the different eras.
Let me just say this. I said this earlier, but it's such a fascinating thing, me being a tap teacher and teaching the history of dance and all that. In this country, if you know the history of cultural arts, really, like pop music, jazz music, hip hop, tap dance, hip hop dancing, I feel like you will most likely understand the history of this country. The parallel is unreal. So I think that's I mean, what you're saying is take a deep dive. If you feel inspired,
well, I also want to make another point with what you said. This album is relevant to now. It's not just the past and all of these historical connections to country music and these untold stories, there might be some things that make you uncomfortable, that make you think, is she saying that? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And so it is very relevant, but that is also the other fascinating point with art is a timeline of the cultural experience of people.
Yes.
And you see that in all of these influences that you just mentioned with dance and music and even theater and all of these different types of things. And that's what this is. And I don't know if you always see that in music right now. Like, yeah, it might represent what's trendy, what's a good sound, but I think she's pushing in areas that are uncomfortable.
I mean, a lot of times we're seeing in music, it's representing what the entertainment industry is thinking is current, right? And what we're saying with this album is it's representing social and cultural movements, social and cultural, just where we are right now. And I think if you take someone from, who grew up in the civil rights era, they might take this album and interpret it differently. And I think that's what's so cool about it is it's relevant in this moment. And it also is open to interpretation for no matter where you came from.
Well, and I really think it's interesting too, because as we've talked about different perspectives, different lived experiences, she is sharing a perspective of probably a lot of people in this country, but also it's not everyone's perspective. And I think that it is interesting to really connect the parts of lived experiences, probably her own personal feelings with this, her experiences back when she performed at the Country Music Awards, and then even growing up in Texas. I mean, that Texas connection too, and being Black and all these, and a woman and a mom, there's so many interesting parts and pieces to this. And I wish we could dive into it more, but we would love to take your questions, DM us over on Instagram. If you are curious about something, we can send you something. But this is just a fun, fascinating conversation. And Shantae and I really are intrigued by that social, cultural influence that we're seeing everywhere right now. And it's fascinating as we watch it and we want to talk about it and we want to try to understand it. But most importantly, we don't want it to disconnect us as humans. And that's why we want to continue to engage even on some of these topics that might be controversial or people may have strong feelings. Right. All those feelings are welcome. But let's also talk about them. So
I love that.
We'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings on this. And a big congratulations to Beyonce on this historic win and just all that she has inspired with this. And also to Miss Martell.
Someday we'll make it on by.
Let's Talk Sis is produced by Ross Booth for WB Productions. For more, join us on Instagram at Let's Talk Sis.
Either way, we're gonna get better.